There is a moment in every man's life when he realizes he has been a fool, not the harmless kind of fool who trips over his own shoelaces or forgets his wife's birthday. No, the kind of fool who builds his entire kingdom on the backs of people he never bothered to see. My name is Victor Harrington. I was 43 years old when I learned that the most brilliant mind I would ever encounter had been cleaning the toilets in my building for 7 months, and I had walked past her every single day without so much as a glance. This is the story of how a girl with nothing taught a man with everything the only equation that ever truly mattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that Wednesday in November, the day the rain wouldn't stop, the day I made a bet that would change my life forever. Harrington Technologies occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. From my corner office on the 42nd floor, I could see the lake stretching toward the horizon like a promise of something greater. I liked that view. It reminded me every morning that I had conquered something, that I had built something from the ashes of my father's failed hardware store in Ohio. 18 patents, 300 employees, a net worth that made Forbes call me the quiet titan of quantum computing. I had everything a man could want, except peace. But that's not what this story is about. Not really. That Wednesday began like any other. My assistant, a nervous man named Gerald who sweated through his shirts by noon, handed me the daily briefing. "The Meridian acquisition is stalling," he said, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. "Their board wants more assurances about the integration timeline." I waved my hand dismissively. "They'll come around, they always do." "And, sir, there's the matter of the Nakamura Fellowship candidates. The committee is waiting for your final selection." Ah, the Nakamura Fellowship. My one concession to philanthropy, my accountant liked to call it. Every year, Harrington Technologies sponsored a full scholarship for a promising student in theoretical physics. Named after my former mentor, Dr. Kenji Nakamura, who had died 3 years prior and left me with a guilt I couldn't quite name. "Send them in," I said. What followed was an hour of presentations from 5 of the most polished, articulate, utterly forgettable candidates I had ever seen. Harvard, MIT, Cambridge. They all blurred together, bright young men and women who spoke of quantum entanglement and computational limits with the practiced ease of actors reciting lines. None of them had that spark, that hunger. The thing Dr. Nakamura used to call the fire that burns regardless of oxygen. I dismissed them all. "Sir," Gerald said carefully, "that was the entire list." Then the list was insufficient. I stood at the window, watching the rain trace rivers down the glass. Behind me, I could hear Gerald's pen scratching against his tablet as he made notes. The man was always making notes. I often wondered if he was writing a book about me, a biography of the monster on the 42nd floor. "I want to see something real," I said. "More to the window than to Gerald. Not another prodigy who's been groomed since birth. Find me someone who had to fight for it, someone who knows what it means to be hungry. Sir, with all due respect, the candidates we presented came from the most rigorous—" "Get me someone else." I heard him swallow. "Yes, sir." It was at that moment that the door opened without a knock. I turned, already preparing to deliver a reprimand that would make whoever had entered regret their life choices. Instead, I saw her. She was small. That was the first thing I noticed. Barely 5 feet, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid that had loosened throughout the day. She wore the gray uniform of the building's cleaning staff, a yellow cart beside her, loaded with supplies. Her skin was the color of milked tea, and her eyes, large, dark, impossibly alert, widened when she realized she had walked into an occupied room. "I am so sorry," she said, her accent carrying the musical lilt of someone who had learned English as a second language but had mastered it completely. "The schedule said this floor would be empty. I will come back." "Wait," I said. I don't know why I said it. Something about the way she didn't cower. the way she met my eyes directly, as if she were looking at a man instead of a title. She stopped. On my desk, left over from the morning's frustrated work session, was a single sheet of paper, the Riemann hypothesis, one of mathematics' great unsolved problems. I had been staring at it for weeks, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle box with no visible seams. Not because I thought I could solve it, no one could solve it, but because it reminded me of what I used to love about mathematics, the purity, the elegance, the way a single equation could describe the bones of the universe. I picked up the paper and looked at the cleaning woman. "You," I said, "come here." She hesitated. I could see her calculating the risk. Was this some kind of test? Oh, a trap? Would she lose her job if she refused? Finally, she walked toward my desk, leaving her cart by the door. "Look at this," I said, sliding the paper toward her. She looked. Her brow furrowed slightly. She tilted her head, the way a bird does when it hears a sound it doesn't quite recognize. "This is the Riemann hypothesis," she said quietly. I felt something cold move through my chest. A cleaning woman who recognized the Riemann hypothesis. Gerald, behind me, made a small sound of surprise. "Do you know what it means?" I asked. "It describes the distribution of prime numbers," she said, "the non-trivial zeros of the Riemann zeta function. If proven, it would have implications for cryptography, quantum computing, the very architecture of secure communications." She said this the way someone else might describe the weather. I sat down heavily in my chair. "Who are you?" "My name is Priya Deshpande. I clean floors 20 through 45, Tuesday through Saturday, 7 in the evening, until 3 in the morning." That's not what I asked. She met my eyes again. This time, I saw something flicker behind them, something old, something tired. "I was a graduate student at the University of Mumbai," she said. "Mathematics. I came to America on a visa that was supposed to lead to a doctorate at Northwestern. 3 weeks after I arrived, my father died. My mother needed surgery. My sister needed school fees. The visa requirements changed. I could not afford to continue." She paused. "So now I clean floors." I stared at her for a long moment. The rain continued its assault on the windows. Gerald had stopped breathing entirely. "You expect me to believe," I said slowly, "that a mathematical prodigy is mopping my floors because of visa issues?" Her jaw tightened. "I expect nothing from you, sir. I came to clean your office. If you prefer, I will leave and return when you are finished with your work." There it was, that fire, that oxygen-independent burn. I laughed. It surprised even me. The sound was harsh in the quiet room. "You know what?" I said. "I've been sitting here all day, listening to presentations from the most brilliant minds in the country, candidates for a fellowship that could change someone's life. And not one of them could hold my attention for more than 30 seconds. I leaned forward. "So, here's what I propose. I'm going to give you a problem, a real problem, not the Riemann hypothesis, something else. Something I've been working on for 6 months. If you can solve it, or even make meaningful progress, I'll give you the Nakamura Fellowship, full scholarship, all expenses, the whole thing." Gerald made a strangled sound behind me. "Sir, you can't just—" "Be quiet, Gerald." Priya Deshpande looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. "And if I cannot solve it?" I shrugged. "Then you go back to cleaning floors. No harm done." "There is always harm done," she said softly. But she didn't walk away. I pulled a fresh sheet of paper from my desk drawer and began to write. The problem I had been wrestling with for half a year. A modification of the Yang-Mills existence and mass gap problem applied to a theoretical model of quantum state preservation in room temperature superconductors. It was elegant, it was fiendish, and it was, as far as I knew, unsolvable. I slid the paper toward her. "Solve this," I said, "and I'll marry you." I don't know why I said that last part. It was meant as a joke, a cruel joke, perhaps, the kind of thing a man says when he has too much power and too little wisdom. Something to amuse myself, something to put this presumptuous cleaning woman in her place. She looked at the paper. I expected confusion, hesitation, perhaps anger. Instead, she smiled. It was the smallest smile I had ever seen, a microscopic lifting of the corners of her mouth. But in that moment, I felt something shift in my chest, as if the tectonic plates of my certainty had suddenly slipped. She pulled a pen from her pocket, a cheap blue pen, the kind they give away at banks, and she began to write. For 3 minutes, the only sound in the room was the scratch of her pen against the paper and the rain against the glass. Gerald had frozen completely. I watched her hand move, quick, decisive, confident, as she filled the margins of my unsolvable problem with equations I didn't immediately recognize. She stopped. She looked at what she had written. Then she added one final line at the bottom. She slid the paper back to me. "I believe," she said, "that this is the beginning of a proof. It will need verification, of course, and the integration with the mass gap component is incomplete, but the topology is correct." I looked at the paper. I looked at the equations. I looked at the final line, which connected her work to my original problem in a way that was so elegantly obvious I wanted to throw something. I felt my face go cold. "This," I began, "is not a complete solution," she finished for me, "but it is meaningful progress, which, if I remember correctly, was your requirement." I couldn't speak. She reached down and picked up my pen, the Mont Blanc that cost more than she probably made in a month, and wrote something else at the bottom of the page, her phone number. "For the fellowship paperwork," she said, "when you are ready." Then she turned and walked back to her cart. At the door she paused. "About the other offer," she said. "The marriage. I appreciate the gesture, but I think I would need at least dinner first." And then she was gone. The silence she left behind was absolute. Gerald finally found his voice. "Sir, did that just—" "Get out," I said. "But, sir, get out!" He fled. I sat alone in my office for 3 hours, staring at that paper, at her handwriting, neat, precise, unhurried, at the equations that rewrote everything I thought I understood about my own work. The rain stopped some time after midnight. I didn't notice. The next morning, I had Gerald pull Priya Deshpande's personnel file. It was thin, a photocopy of her work visa, an emergency contact number, a single reference from a professor at Mumbai University. I called the number. The man who answered spoke with the weariness of someone who had been asked the same questions many times. "Priya Deshpande?" he said. "Yes, I remember her. She was the best student I had in 30 years, perhaps the best I will ever have." "Then why didn't you help her when she needed it, when her visa situation changed?" A long pause. "Do you know how many brilliant students we lose every year, Mr. Harrington? How many minds we watch slip through the cracks because of money or politics or simple bad luck? I wrote letters, I made calls, but there are limits to what one old man can do from 10,000 miles away." His voice cracked slightly. "I think about her every day, what she could have become, what we lost." I hung up. That afternoon, I sent Gerald to find her, not to offer her the fellowship. I had already decided on that, but to ask her something else, something that had been eating at me since the moment she walked out of my office. "Why?" I asked when she finally stood before my desk again. This time she wore a clean blouse and slacks instead of the gray uniform. She had left her cleaning cart somewhere else. "Why what? Why did you take the job? Here, I mean. Of all the buildings in Chicago, why this one?" She looked at me with those dark, intelligent eyes. "Because you funded the research that my professor worked on for 20 years. The quantum entanglement studies, the work that led to your 18th patent." I felt the blood drain from my face. "The superconductor project?" "Yes." "Your professor was Aditya Sharma?" "Yes." The name hit me like a physical blow. Aditya Sharma. The collaborator I had worked with for 5 years through emails and video calls, the man who had sent me breakthrough after breakthrough from his small lab in Mumbai, the man I had promised to bring to America, to give a position in my company, to reward for his contributions. The man I had forgotten about completely when the project succeeded and the patents were filed. He died, I said. 2 years ago. Heart attack. 3 years ago, she corrected gently. And it was not a heart attack. It was exhaustion. He worked himself to death waiting for a promise that never came. I couldn't meet her eyes. I took this job, she continued, because I wanted to understand. I wanted to see what kind of man could take everything from someone and then forget they ever existed. I wanted to know if you were a monster or simply inattentive. And what did you conclude? She was quiet for a long moment. I concluded that you are neither, she said finally. You are simply alone. And lonely people make terrible decisions without even realizing they are making them. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that the business had grown so fast, that there were so many demands on my time, that I had always intended to honor my commitment to Aditya Sharma. But all of that was true, and all of it was also worthless. What do you want? I asked. Really, the fellowship, money, the company? Tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. I want you to remember. Remember what? That behind every patent, every success, every number on your balance sheet, there are real people. People who sacrifice things you cannot imagine. People who trust you with their dreams. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It showed a man in his 60s, thin and gray-haired, standing in front of a chalkboard covered in equations. He was smiling. Behind him, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was a young woman with dark hair. This was taken 1 week before he died, she said. He was showing me his latest work, the modification that made your superconductor project possible. She set the photograph on my desk. He kept a picture of you in his office. Did you know that? A magazine cover from Fortune. He used to point at it and tell his students that this is what happens when you believe in someone. I couldn't breathe. He believed in you, Mr. Harrington. He believed you would change the world. He just never lived to see if he was right. She turned to leave. Wait, I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. She stopped. Have dinner with me. She looked at me over her shoulder. Mr. Harrington, Victor, please just let me try to fix this. Not with the fellowship, not with money. Let me try to fix it as a person. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, slowly, she nodded. Friday, she said. 7 o'clock. You can pick me up at my apartment. I will text you the address. Where do you want to go? Any restaurant in the city? She considered this. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can hear you think. And then, for the second time, she walked out of my office. But this time, I felt something different in her wake. Not shame. Hope. The dinner was at a small Ethiopian restaurant on the south side. Priya had chosen it because, she said, the injera reminded her of the dosas her grandmother used to make. I had never eaten Ethiopian food before. I had never been to the south side before. I had lived in Chicago for 15 years and knew perhaps 3 neighborhoods. She laughed when I told her this. You are very good at building towers, she said, not so good at leaving them. We ate with our hands, tearing pieces of the spongy bread and scooping up the spiced lentils and vegetables. She told me about her childhood in Pune, about her father, an accountant who used to challenge her with puzzles at breakfast, about her mother who had wanted her to be a doctor but supported her anyway when she chose mathematics. I told her about Ohio, about my father's hardware store, about the day the big box store opened across the street and we watched our customers disappear, one by one, until there was nothing left. Is that why you became who you are? She asked. To never be that powerless again? I thought about it. Yes, I said. And also no. I think I became who I am because I forgot that the goal was never to have power. It was to do something meaningful with it. She nodded. That is the first wise thing you have said since I met you. We talked for 4 hours, then we walked along the lake, watching the city lights reflect on the water. She told me about the equations she was working on in her spare time. Late at night, after her shifts, on napkins and scrap paper and the backs of envelopes. I never stopped, she said. Even when I was cleaning toilets, I never stopped thinking. It is the only thing that makes sense to me. The patterns, the elegance, the way the universe hides its secrets in plain sight. What would you do, I asked, if you had all the resources you needed, if you could study anything? I would finish what Professor Sharma started, she said without hesitation. The room temperature superconductor, not for the patents or the money, but because he believed it would change everything. Power transmission, computing, medicine, everything. Would you do it here, at Harrington Technologies? She looked at me sharply. Is that an offer? It's a question. She was quiet for a moment. I would consider it, she said finally, if the offer was genuine, and if I believed that you understood what it would mean. What would it mean? It would mean trusting me, not as an employee, not as a charity case, as a partner, someone with equal voice, someone who could tell you when you were wrong. I don't have many people who do that. I know. I have seen your company's structure. It is designed to prevent dissent. I laughed. It surprised me. You've analyzed my company's structure. I clean your offices, Mr. Harrington. I have had a lot of time to observe. We reached a bench overlooking the water. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of the lake and the distant hum of traffic. Victor, I said. What? You keep calling me Mr. Harrington. I told you, it's Victor. She turned to look at me. In the dim light, her face was half shadow. Victor, she said, testing the word. That is a very serious name for a very serious man. And Priya? What does that mean? It means beloved. I felt something move in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Priya, I said, I would like to offer you a position at Harrington Technologies, not as a fellow, not as a student, as the head of a new research division, your own lab, your own team, complete autonomy to pursue whatever projects you believe are most important. She stared at me. You are serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. And the fellowship? Give it to someone who needs it more. You don't need a scholarship. You need a platform. She was quiet for a long time. I could see her processing the offer, weighing the implications, calculating the risks. And what do you get? She asked finally. What do you mean? Everyone wants something, Victor. What do you want from this arrangement? I thought about her question, about the real answer, about what I was afraid to say. I want to be part of something that matters, I said. Not just my name on a building, not just my face on a magazine. I want to look back at my life and know that I helped create something good, something that will outlast me. That is a big thing to ask from one research project. I know. That's why I'm asking you. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm despite the cold wind. I will think about it, she said. But I want you to know that my answer is probably yes. Probably? I need to see your lab facilities first and meet the people I would be working with and negotiate a contract that protects my intellectual property. I smiled. You've thought about this. I have been thinking about it for 3 years, she said, ever since Professor Sharma died. I have been planning what I would do if I ever got the chance. And I think you are my chance, Victor Harrington. I just needed to make sure you were worth taking. We sat there on that bench until the stars came out, talking about equations and dreams and the strange paths that lead us to the people who will change our lives. At some point, I realized I was holding her hand. At some point, I realized I didn't want to let go. 6 months later, Priya Deshpande solved the problem that had eluded me for years, the room temperature superconductor, the holy grail of materials science, the breakthrough that would, as she had predicted, change everything. She didn't solve it alone. She built a team, 23 researchers from 12 countries, including 3 of Dr. Sharma's former students who she had personally tracked down and recruited. She created a culture of collaboration and curiosity, where ideas were valued more than titles and Failure was seen as a stepping stone rather than an ending. I watched her work, I watched her lead, I watched her become everything she was always meant to be. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with her. Not the way I had loved before, not the possessive, anxious, transactional love of my previous relationships. This was something different, something that asked for nothing except the privilege of being near her. I told her on a Tuesday. We were in the lab late at night, surrounded by the hum of equipment and the glow of monitors. She was running simulations, her eyes moving rapidly across streams of data that I could barely follow. "I love you," I said. She didn't look up from her screen. "I know," she said. "You know? Victor, you are many things. Subtle is not one of them." She finally turned to face me. Her expression was gentle but serious. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while. But I needed to know that it was real, that it wasn't just gratitude or proximity or the strange intimacy of working together. And now? Now I know." She stood up from her chair and walked toward me. "But I need you to understand something," she said. "I am not going to become an appendage, a supporting character in your story. If we do this, we do it as equals. We build something together. Shea, I wouldn't want it any other way." She kissed me then, soft and careful and full of promise. "Good," she said, "because I have plans." "What kind of plans?" she smiled. That same microscopic smile I had seen in my office a lifetime ago. "You'll see." 2 years after that night in the lab, Priya Deshpande won the Nobel Prize in Physics. She gave her acceptance speech in Stockholm, wearing a sari that had belonged to her grandmother. She dedicated the award to Dr. Aditya Sharma, whose photograph she projected on the screen behind her. "He used to say that the universe is not a mystery to be solved, but a gift to be understood," she said. "I have spent my life trying to live up to that belief. This prize is not mine. It belongs to everyone who ever looked up at the stars and asked, 'Why?' I sat in the audience, surrounded by dignitaries and scientists and journalists. I was crying. I didn't care. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd. 'Well,' she said, what do you think?' 'I think you are the most remarkable person I have ever known.' She laughed. 'That is not what I meant. I meant the speech. Was it too long? Did I talk too fast?' My mother called and said I sounded nervous. 'Your mother was wrong. You were perfect.' She reached up and wiped a tear from my cheek. 'You are sentimental, Victor Harrington. It is very inconvenient.' 'I know. I love you anyway.' 'I know.' She took my hand. 'Come,' she said. 'There is a reception, and then a dinner, and then a party that will go until 3 in the morning. And you are going to stay by my side through all of it, because that is what partners do.' I followed her. I would have followed her anywhere. We married 3 months later. It was a small ceremony on the grounds of Harrington Technologies in the garden that Priya had designed herself. She wanted a place where her researchers could think and walk and have lunch in the sun, a place that reminded them why they were there. I stood at the altar, watching her walk toward me in a white dress that caught the afternoon light. I remembered the day we met, the gray uniform, the yellow cart, the blue pen in her pocket. I remembered the way she had looked at my unsolvable problem and smiled. I remembered her question about dinner, about needing at least that much before she would consider marrying me. Now, here we were. Gerald stood beside me as best man. He had stopped sweating through his shirts, mostly because Priya had taught him to meditate. He was still making notes all the time. Turns out, he actually was writing a book. "You ready?" he asked. "More than I've ever been ready for anything." Priya reached me. She took my hands. "Do you remember what you said?" she whispered. "That day in your office?" I said a lot of things, most of them stupid. "You said, 'Solve this equation and I'll marry you.'" I laughed. "And you said you would need at least dinner first." I did. She looked up at me, those dark, intelligent eyes, that microscopic smile. "I have had dinner," she said. many dinners, and lunches, and breakfasts, and late nights in the lab, and early mornings watching the sunrise. Is that enough? It will never be enough. But it is a start. The officiant cleared his throat. We turned to face him, and we began. 5 years later, we had 2 children, a boy named Aditya and a girl named Kenji. After the mentors we had lost, after the people who had believed in us before we believed in ourselves, we also had a company that had changed the world. Room temperature superconductors were everywhere now, in power grids and hospitals and transportation systems. Priya's breakthrough had led to a cascade of innovations that we were still discovering. But those are just facts, numbers on a balance sheet. The real story is smaller than that. The real story is about a rainy Wednesday in November, about a cleaning woman with a cheap blue pen, about a man who thought he had everything and discovered he had nothing that mattered. The real story is about the equation I didn't know I was trying to solve, not the Riemann hypothesis, not the Yang-Mills problem, not the superconductor. The equation was simpler than all of that. It went like this: one person, invisible to the world, carrying the weight of 1,000 broken dreams. One person, visible to everyone, carrying the weight of 1,000 empty victories. And the moment when they see each other, not as obstacles, not as opportunities, not as means to an end, as human beings. That's the equation. That's the only one that matters. And if you solve it, really solve it, not just on paper, but in your heart, the answer is always the same: love. I know that sounds simple, maybe even sentimental. Maybe Victor Harrington of 15 years ago would have laughed at it. But Victor Harrington of today, the one who wakes up next to a Nobel laureate, who has breakfast with 2 children, who will never doubt that they are loved, who walks through a garden every morning that exists because someone believed in people. Victor Harrington of today knows the truth. The universe hides its secrets in plain sight. Sometimes they are disguised as cleaning women with blue pens. Sometimes you have to be humbled before you can be lifted. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is to be proven wrong. Spectacularly, completely, beautifully wrong. Now, if you'll excuse me, my wife is calling. She has a new equation she wants to show me, and I, for one, cannot wait to see what she solves next.